So let's talk a little bit about typography. We went over this last week, the art and technique of arranging type to make written language legible, readable, and appealing when displayed. The arrangement of type involves selecting typefaces, point sizes, the line length, line spacing, letter spacing, and adjusting the space within the letter pairs. And I discussed a little bit about how, certain fonts are drawn very well, and that's why the spacing between them is nice and it works. And then there are certain fonts that just aren't drawn very well. And I have an example I want to show you of something I ran into today, which has to do with the spacing between the letters and how sometimes it starts out fine, but you need to kind of watch what you're doing because sometimes you're going to have to adjust, maybe based on one letter or one number to make things work and to make things look correct. So let me just show you what I'm talking about. That's fine. Hopefully it saved the font that I was working on. I believe it was this font, yes. All right, so I was working with this font today. And I noticed I had to do a lot of numbers. So we have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 0. And once I started getting into the number combinations, such as 11, 12, 13, 14, like so far it looks good, 16, 17. Like, look at what happens with the number 7. And you'll notice that my spacing has remained consistent, just as 0, between each of these letters, or numbers, actually. But the way that the 7 is drawn in this font is it's at a little bit of a different angle. Let me see if I can kind of isolate it just so you can see. So I'm going to turn that into image. I'll just make it pink so it kind of stands out. Look at the angle and the placement of where it defaults putting that 7. If you drew a line kind of right down the center of it, and you moved this over to where it should line up, it would render better, basically. But because of the way it's drawn and just the default of how the font is set up, it puts that 7, the swoop, really close. So it brings the whole number over. So this is something that I would need to keep an eye out for and just kind of bump the spacing over between the 1 and the 7 so they don't run into each other. And it gives it the same amount of space between those two numbers that it does between these ones. So this is what I mean about how fonts are drawn and how well they're drawn and how well they're thought out. When you're putting all the numbers together in a line, it looks fine. But like I said, let me copy this one. Like I'll do 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, and 27. And it does it again. So that 7 is just problematic. So I'm going to have to, again, adjust, which is my tracking. Or, I'm sorry, my kerning. I always get those mixed up, which is which. The kerning is the space between the letters. And before I said the word kerning, I wanted to make sure I was right, and then I doubted myself. And it's not always going to be the same, what you need to move it. Between the 1, which is obviously skinnier than the 2. So I'm at 66 here, and I was at 118 here to move it over because one's at kind of an angle. So, this has to do with how fonts are drawn. And I might not run into this same problem. Let me copy and paste this line. with a different font. So let's see what happens when I change the font from Carrington to I want to find a very well-drawn font. Let's go with Franklin Gothic. That's a very well-drawn font. So here's the default spacing, 22, 23, 24, 25. And then here's that spacing that I copied and pasted over. And look at how far that 7 moved over. So once I put the default back to 0, it looks correct on this in this line. And that's because this is just a better drawn font, honestly, where your spacing is more thought out, and things like that. So this is where, kind of knowing a little bit about fonts, you're going to run into these problems from time to time. So you just want to kind of keep an eye out when you're typing and make sure that things aren't running into each other. Letters aren't running into each other, that the spacing is correct. Sometimes you may see some of those monotype fonts and the spacing is crazy. Let me see if I can do an example of that. I know that there is a monotype font somewhere in here. Might even be called monotype. Here's one. Any of these. But see how much space it adds just for space? Like in between the 3 and the comma, that's not a well-drawn font. So those are, kind of the differences between an okay drawn font. There's going to be some things that you need to watch, a well-drawn font, and one that's just not well thought out. There's different levels of typography out there. So, be aware of what's going on when you are picking your fonts, because typography is definitely central to graphic design. It's one of the fundamental parts of a designer's education, and it's what sets us apart from other artists. Painters don't need to think about typography. Illustrators who are just making drawings, they don't need to think about typography, and photographers don't need to think about typography. We need to think about everything as graphic designers. We need to think about the color, which painters would need to think about. We need to think about the images, which illustrators would think about. We need to think about the other images, photographs, like photographers would think about. And then we have to also add typography to the mix. So we really need to be a jack of all trades in our field. And one of the hardest things is probably typography. So I had found this graphic, which I think is great, and I'm going to share my slideshow with you so you'll be able to kind of go in. It is the 10 Commandments of Typography. So number 1 is, let me see if I can present this, make it a little bit bigger for those who are watching at home. So number 1, know your font families. Ever heard of GOTS? It's GHOTMS. Geometric, Humanist, Old Style, Transitional, Modern, and Slav. Combine a sans serif font with a serif font, so Mary to Minion, Gothic and Castellar. Here's some good combinations. Combine a serif font with a sans serif font, so we're just kind of switching them around. Combining 2 similar fonts, not cool. So these are very similar, but they're clearly a different font. You don't want to do that. Contrast is key. Stick to 2 fonts. Only go for 3 if you must. That's such a good rule. And it's a rule that's going to really save your butt a lot of times with design, I find. If you stick to that rule. Don't mix different moods. So you can tell, these fonts all have a different vibe to them. Combine fonts of complementary moods and of similar time errors. Fonts that were created around the same time tend to have the same mood. So if you're really into fonts, which I think you should be, honestly, as a graphic designer, I totally think you should be into fonts. Start to look at the history of fonts and the history of typography. It's really, really interesting. There is a documentary called Helvetica, and if you ever get a chance to watch it, I highly suggest it. It's such a great documentary. I've seen it probably 4 times. It used to be on Netflix, but I'm not 100% sure if it is still on Netflix, but you might even be able to find it on YouTube. I definitely suggest watching it. Use different weights of the fonts in the same family. And lastly, please avoid the following fonts. And it's true. Like, really try to avoid those. We've got Comic Sans, Papyrus, Curls, I think it's Viner, Kristen, and this one that's just, I don't even know what it is. It's like symbols, but it's awful. This is a good 10 commandments to live by. And believe me, your designs will be much better for it. So we had the 8 rules for creating effective typography. Number 1, learn the basics. Number 2, watch your kerning. Number 3, be aware of font communications. What is your font communicating? That's a big one. Number 4, be aware of alignment. Choose a good secondary font. Size matters. Use typography as art. And then find good inspiration. So I think these are 8 great rules. And we have some common mistakes in typography, and we've all made them. Believe me, I didn't start out as a great designer. I really didn't. And I'm not going to lie. I mean, I've gone back to some of my very first things that I designed, and I'm like, oh, I thought this looked so awesome. And look at those font choices I made. Oh, that's terrible. I would never do this now. But that's because, you know what? As a graphic designer, you should never peak. You should always still be learning and, changing how you design and keeping up to date with what trends are and pushing the boundaries of what you're designing. If you ever get to a point where you think that you know everything, you are no longer a good designer. I firmly believe that. Never stop learning when it comes to graphic design. Never stop looking at what's out there. Never stop looking for great inspiration. And never stop, putting your work out there for critique. Believe me, every time I do freelance work, I'm putting it right out there for a critique. And, there's times where I'll miss things and it'll come back and they might like what I do. They might not like what I do. And if they don't like it, I try to say, all right, you know what? What is it that they don't like? Maybe I need to change things up a bit. Maybe I've gotten a little bit stale. So, really just keep pushing yourself as designers, and that will make you like the best designers, seriously. So here are some common mistakes in typography, and I have been guilty of all of these at some point in my career and in my schooling. Having text that's too close to the edge of the page, text that is too close to other items, text that is unreadable over the background, so that could be dark text on a dark background, light text on a light background, or text over a multicolored background. All caps in the body text. It's generally a bad idea because it makes it very difficult to read. Too much use of handwritten fonts. Those, again, are also very difficult to read. Inconsistent spacing after paragraphs. Too many effects that are being used on the text. Outlined body text. Body text that is too large or too bold. And then we also went over visual hierarchy, which is really important when we are doing our designs. We want to guide our, people's eyes across the page. So the way we do that is how we lay out our page. And usually you can get away with telling their eyes to go 3 places. After the 3rd place, chances are good they're going to look at what they look at. But if you can kind of get them to see those first 3 things, and I have a demonstration I can actually do that I'll go over with you guys after I read the slide. I'll turn on my camera and show you. Just a couple of good things that I've seen design-wise. And if you're ever looking for good ideas, like in looking to say, all right, you know what, I need to see some good ideas of what is good visual hierarchy, get out a magazine, like a professional magazine. Oh, excuse me. Oh, excuse me. Sorry, my allergies are horrible today. So, since people do not spend more than a few seconds looking at an ad, we spend hours making them, and it's true. People do not spend more than a few seconds looking. The principle of visual hierarchy creates order and coherence. It facilitates rapid message communication. It is the arrangement of all graphic elements according to emphasis, and it is employed to guide the viewer. So basically what you're doing is you're telling the viewer, you know, what you want them to see first, second, and third. And like I said, you know, kind of after that, there's a good chance that their eyes are going to just go where they go. But, you know, if you can, you know, cause them to look here, then here, then here, you've probably, you know, done your headline, your subheadline, and some sort of a call to action. You've been able to get that information out. So let me just turn on my camera real quick. All right, so I have an ad right here that I'm going to show you. I'm going to take it down. And I'll show it 1, 2, 3, and take it down. So where did your eye go? It probably started at the baby, because it's a big picture. Then you probably saw that there's a block of text here, and I understand it's on my webcam, so it's not really easy to see. And it says, our softest, gentlest way to clean the world's softest, gentlest skin. So your eye has probably done this down to here. Here's the package. Where you go after that, you know, if you're wondering what this is and you want more information, chances are good you'll read this information here, and then you'll read this information here. But even if they get you to see the baby, softest, gentlest, and Huggies, they're done. You're going to remember that, and you looked at the ad, you know what it's for, and you know who the company is. So they've completed what they want you to do. Let me find another good one, and then I'm going to show you a bad one. So here's another good one. Again. And, all right. So we have baby, safe sleep, our number one priority, boppy, basically. So your eyes go, boop, like that, right across the page. Look here, then here, then here. Those are the things that'll end up standing out to you. And that's exactly what they want. And then if you happen to want to read more about the product, then you'll see, oh, you can use it like this. You can read about this. You can learn more at their website. But really all they want you to know is safe sleep. All right, that's going to stick out to you. And there's a baby sleeping. So, or laying down, baby's awake. Here's an ad that I don't think works well. I'm going to put it up on the screen, and then I'll discuss why. All right. Here's my reason why. Number one, and think about this at home while you're watching. Do you even know what that ad was for? I mean, you might have seen the logo up at the top, Ducks. Do you know what Ducks is? I don't know what Ducks is. I've never heard of that brand. There's a lady here. All right, so she's pregnant. You can kind of get a theme as to what magazine I have. There's some images down here, but I don't know what they are. I actually have to, they're very dark, so I actually have to really look. And then I see that it looks like a back. It looks like this image right here. Let me see if I can. To me, it looks like you're packing a suitcase, but that's not actually what's going on. This, when I first looked at it, I thought it was diamonds. It's not. We have a forest and then a bedroom. So I've looked at this ad. I see a pregnant lady, and then I see sleeping for 2 changes everything. Okay. But I have to actually read all of this to figure out that they make a bed. And none of that is being shown to me. And if I'm going to look at this ad for 3 seconds, you are, number one, not selling me on what it is that you make. I've never heard of your brand, and your image has nothing to do with the bed. I understand that there's a pregnant lady here, but this magazine is called Pregnancy and Newborn. There's a lot of pregnant ladies in this magazine. Like, you're not communicating to me by putting a pregnant lady on your ad. So that's why this doesn't work. And I've shown this in a couple of classes, and the funny thing is I actually actively looked for a bad ad in the magazine so I could show you when we were flipping through in a different course. And I came across this ad while I was flipping, and I was like, I don't even know what this ad is for. So that's just an example of using visual hierarchy, picking the right images, and, you know, how you want the ad to be laid out. The first two, your eyes went around the ad, you knew what the product was, and, you know, it made sense by the time you were done. But that last ad I showed you, it's very difficult to see right from looking at it what it's for. And I must have flipped through that magazine probably 50 times, especially because I use it in a lot of my courses as a visual aid. And every single time I will look at that ad for 2 seconds and I flip right past it. And it's not that it's a poorly designed ad. When you look at the design of the ad, it looks very elegant. The image is very nice, but the message that you are trying to get across as an advertisement has not gotten across. So yes, it's a well-designed ad, but it's not a well-designed, it's a well-designed layout, I should say. It's a well-designed layout. It is not a well-designed advertisement, because I can't see right away what it is that you're advertising, and it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. All right, so just a couple of examples. And these are the things that you can look for if you go through a magazine. It's really going to help you to kind of understand what works and what doesn't work. Get your hands on, next time you go to the doctors or the dentist, or, hey, even if you're at the DMV, sometimes they have magazines laying around. Flip through, and instead of just flipping through to pass the time, use that time wisely and try to interact with that magazine and try to figure out design-wise what works and what doesn't, and then think about why it works or it doesn't. So we have some basics of hierarchy and design. In typography, headlines should be the biggest and boldest. Subheaders can be bigger than the body text, but they should be smaller than the headlines. Body text should be the smallest and should have little to no effect, such as bolding or italics. Visually, you need to design so the viewer can visually see the most important part of the design, the call to action, the images, the headlines, etc. The rest of the page should lead the eye through the design using grids, colors, typography, or other things, so the viewer can easily read the page while being visually stimulated. Because if they aren't, they're just going to flip, and all of that money that you paid for that advertisement goes right out the window. All right, so this week, we are going to be making some Facebook pages. And again, I'm going to show you, a walkthrough on how to do this tomorrow. But let's go in and take a look real quick at our assessment, because our assessment is the Facebook page. And what we need to do is actually design a Facebook profile picture, 3 different cover images for your city, and you need to, set it all up in the Facebook template that is provided, which again is in the announcement. So I'm going to open that up real quick so we can take a look so you can see what that looks. Actually, I probably have it. Hold on one moment. I can open that right up for you. And I think it's good that we look. Here's the thing, like the mock-up for this Facebook page is a little bit different than what Facebook looks like right now, because it feels like every month Facebook ends up changing what they look like. So there we go. So you have a spot to put in your profile picture, a cover image, 4 pictures here. You want to put your slogan here, your brand here. So your brand is your city, your brand here, and this photo. And I'll show you how to set this up. Like I said, tomorrow, there's a really easy way to edit this PSD file that will make your life a lot easier, which is good. But you need to have 3 different versions of this. And within those 3 different versions, you should probably have 3 different slogans as well. So again, go back to those slogans that you used in your billboard and see if they will also work on your social media page. And then you'll save them as JPEGs, you'll put them into one zip folder, and you will upload them. So again, you need to make sure that you are downloading that template and you're creating 3 of these. But the reason why I want to, again, show you this is what the template looks like. This is what Facebook looks like right now if you go to a page. I actually took these screenshots today because the screenshots I did have in here were a little bit different from like 2 months ago because Facebook's constantly changing things. So here's an example of what the city of Boston, their Facebook page looks like. So they have a nice big cover photo here. You'll notice their cover photo has a slogan on it, 4/15 is Boston Day. They have the featured images are now down here. They're a lot bigger in our template. They run across the top. That's the same idea. The name, City of Boston. So you would have your brand here, City of Boston. Then they have, I think it's right here or right here where we put your slogan here. You know, they have a little blurb, or your slogan could be, you know, city in Boston, Massachusetts. You know, I would write a little slogan. Your fake website you can put in there. And then where it says your brand, that should also say, again, city of Boston, whatever your city is, you know, whatever your name is. I have another example, which is the city of New York. So again, they have their profile picture, their cover photo. Their cover photo overlays their logo really tiny. And I'm not going to lie, I'm not 100% sold on their layout that they have for the city of New York. I think that they could have done, you know, a little bit better. I think that they should have a slogan, but, and then they have government organization in New York, New York. So that's their slogan, basically. And again, they have their main photos right here. Then we have city, or not even city, it's well, maybe Newport's a city. I don't know if it's considered a city or a town. Newport, Rhode Island. So they have their logo right here, which is being used as their profile picture. And that's what you should do. Your profile picture one of these needs to contain your logo. Either your profile picture needs to contain your logo, or your cover photo needs to contain your logo. But one of them needs to contain the logo, the finalized logo that you created this last week. That needs to be present in all of your material going forward. Now they have this bar here, and the funny thing is the reason why they have this bar here is Facebook used to also run, you know, City of Newport, Rhode Island in white text across your cover image when you had a page, as opposed to your personal page. If you had a like page, they would run the name. They don't do that anymore, but you can tell that they haven't updated their cover photo, which this is a good cover photo. And the reason why they put that bar there was so that way when the text overlaid it, it wasn't getting lost on top of the images. So it all ended up working together, and then Facebook changed the way that they do things. So again, same as the other ones. You have your city of, Newport page, and, your photos. They actually put in a map, which is good, in their top spot. So you know how to get there, and their little blurb and everything else. So the layout of Facebook now, a little bit different than the mock-up template, but follow the mock-up template and you will be fine. All right. The next thing that we're going to be creating this week is we are going to be, wrong way. Creating a web page for our assignment. This is just a mock-up. This web page does not need to work, so don't get scared. You're just creating a mock-up in Photoshop. So I'm going to read you the little description. Because most people like to plan ahead, it's vital that every travel campaign also include a dynamic and engaging website. This week, we are going to use the visuals that you've developed in week 1 and week 2 to create a homepage for the ad campaign of your chosen city. You don't have to make the website active. Rather, use Photoshop to mock up what the site might look like. So your size needs to be 1024 by 768. You can make it taller, I will tell you this. The page must have the following bars and a navigation bar: places to stay, dining, events, and shopping. You need to use your logo, your tagline, and keep the field cohesive with the rest of your campaign. So what does that mean? That means if I look at your Facebook page, I look at your billboard designs, I look at your postcard, I look at your website, it should all look like it's for the same company. That means they should all have your logo on it. They should all have the same feel about them. I should be able to put them side by side and know that it's one cohesive ad campaign. So remember, use quality images and keep the homepage very visual and easy to navigate. So this you're going to submit as a 72 DPI JPEG file. And again, we'll be working on this tomorrow. But if you need some examples, you can check out these 3 websites. Oh, and apparently the Turkey is not, let me see, visit Turkey. Yeah, Turkery, yeah. That might be their website now. All right, so they changed their website, which is fine. So here's the website for Wyoming. So you can see, very visual, nice big picture. They have That's Wyoming, some things can't be explained, only experienced, and they have a big button. And this is where I was talking about above the fold. So before I scroll down, all of this shows before I scroll down, all of this information. We've got the navigation up here in a bar. Again, their logo right here, prominently displayed. So this is a great example of a homepage design. Even though it's interactive, you can just choose one image and create something like this, and that would be a great example of a homepage. Here's another one. Again, even though the images circulate, look at all of the information that is on this page, right above the fold. Read more stories. I can get to their Facebook, their Twitter, discover more, something about a visa, and it's for Turkey. Then we have Travel Wisconsin, and again, very similar to the Travel Wyoming. You can do a search, however. Again, the navigation bar. My navigation is nice and easy to find, and it makes sense. So don't reinvent the wheel when you are designing your homepage mockups. Things work a certain way for a reason, and things are designed a certain way for a reason. It's because we intuitively know how to navigate around the web these days. So go close those out. So those web pages have a nice aesthetic. I can never say that word. Aesthetic in web design. So that's what we're going to talk about right now. Aesthetics are a set of principles concerned with the nature and appreciation of beauty, especially in art. Every design will have some kind of aesthetic. Whether or not you consciously create an aesthetic for a website, it will have one, and people will see it and judge it based on the beauty they perceive in it. Even more, that aesthetic is going to be involved in the communication between site and viewer. You might as well take advantage of the opportunity. An obvious question you might ask, though, is where should the aesthetic come from? And can it be anything, or should it be unified with the rest of the design? I can't talk today. So where should it come from? This is something I want you to think about. Can it be anything, or should it be unified with the rest of the design? Stop and really ponder those two questions. Now, lynda.com, the lynda.com playlist for this week has some great videos that you need to watch on aesthetic and design aesthetics for the web. So please make sure that you are navigating over to those. You can find them if you go to modules and scroll down to week 3. Here's your week 3 lynda.com playlist. Click on the link.
Hi, I'm Sue Jane.
And it will open up in a new tab window, and there are quite a few videos to watch this week. Everything from incorporating principles in design, using elements of design, what is aesthetics, examples from art and design. So, make sure that you are watching this week's videos. This is going to help you to figure this all out when you're putting these together. All right. So I have a couple of more examples of some aesthetically beautiful websites. So let's check them out. First, I have Feed Music. Pretty cool. Next, I have ETQ Amsterdam. Then I have Mikiya Kobayashi. Ice and Sky. Close that one out because it's going to keep playing. Then I have World of Swiss. And last but not least, I have Inside Abbey Road. All right, so hi Ralph, I can see that you've joined us today. If you want, you can answer the questions in the chat and I can read out your answers, or if you want to turn on your microphone, it's really up to you. So why were those websites great examples? What worked for each site? Was it the imagery? Was it the music or the auditory that was happening? Was it a clean design? Did you think that there was possibly an enjoyable user experience for each of those sites. So if you would like to answer in the chat, you can. So what do you feel worked for those sites that I just showed you? And if you are at home, you can take a minute and answer as well. Jot down a couple of things. Now, there's something else that I want to point out as well. Did you know that while I was showing you those sites, we only viewed them for 5 seconds? The only
Welcome
one
to
that
Abbey Road Studios. This is Studio One.
The only one that I let go a little bit longer was that Abbey Road one, just so I could click to get it into the next room. But we viewed each of these for 5 seconds. I counted and only let 5 seconds show. So think of how you were able to get a feel of that website in just 5 seconds, whether or not you felt the imagery worked, the music worked, whether you thought it might have had a clean design, or whether you thought it might have even been an enjoyable user experience. You were probably able to gauge an idea of that for each site, for each of these questions, within 5 seconds of being on those websites. So think of this. A typical website visitor has the attention span of about 5 seconds. And you probably know that from going on the web. So the first time they see a web page, it seems like a long time, not really, but try it yourself. Go to a web page you have never visited before, count to 5 in your head, and then leave the website. What do you remember? If nothing grabbed you in the first 5 seconds, or even the first 2 to 3 seconds, you probably would have just navigated away. You're not going to stick around. So you need to think about that when you're designing your web pages. What is going to grab someone's attention in the first 5 seconds that they will stay on your web page and want to come visit your city? You have 5 seconds to hook them. I can tell you with each of these. This one, I immediately saw that I needed to scroll right from the beginning and scroll and take off. So I started scrolling, and I could see that once I started scrolling, the mountains started moving and I was up in the clouds. And then I ended up over here where all of these things were happening as I scrolled through. Different things are coming up. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. So this website was totally interactive in the first 5 seconds. This one, if I go back to the top and just reload it. I don't know if it'll play it again. Oh, there we go. So I noticed right off the bat, it's telling me to scroll, and the images are starting to float away from me. And it's such a clean design, one nice big image. And I just want to see what else is going to happen. And then we've got this is a great user interface when I roll over and they kind of bounce a little bit. Right in there, right in the box that they're in, but it seems like they're moving. That's a great, that's a great layout for this site. Then for this one, let's see if I can reload it. It starts off, and look at my mouse. I don't know if you can see it right here on his finger. My mouse becomes an arrow telling me to go down, to scroll down. So I see the shoes and I see the logo, and it's this nice big image here. And then I scroll down and I'm brought right to the pairs of shoes. And I go back to being a regular mouse that I recognize with the little hand that I know I can select something. So to me, that's a great, user interface. I'm really interacting with the website right from the first 5 seconds. And then for this one, the swirling background with the text overlaying it is whoa, all right, That's really cool. And again, it tells me to scroll down and the text moves. And that's just really, really cool. And then I get into the rest of their site. So within the first 5 seconds, I want to interact with their site. They haven't bored me, and I'm very much intrigued as to what is going on. So, a lot of times when we're designing something, it's going to take us hours to design it, and 5 seconds is about all we have to capture a potential customer's interest. So that initial visual interaction or text someone sees is our opportunity to leave the most powerful impression on them. If we screw up in these first 5 seconds, chances are good that we've lost them and they're not going to come back. So I really want you, when you are creating your websites this week, do your mock-up, send it to a friend and say, please, send an email to a friend, say, can you do me a favor? I'm sending you this mock-up. Can you open it up for 5 seconds and then close it? And all I want you to do, don't open it back up, but I want you to write down what you saw and what you thought my website was about and email it back to me. And see what they say. Or have somebody come over in your house, and open it up on the screen and say, look at this. Leave it open for 5 seconds and close it and say, what was this about? What is this for? And then if they're like, I don't know what it's for, then you know that it didn't work and it needs some tweaking. Open it back up and say, all right, it's for a tourist, website, a homepage. I want you to tour this city. So what needs to stand out for you to understand that that's what I'm trying to get you to do? And if they're like, oh, well, I didn't see the name of your city. All right, if they didn't see the name of your city, then they might not have seen your logo, which means your logo might need to be bigger or might need to be in a bar and be more prominent, like in those examples from the other travel websites. Oh, well, I didn't really know what city you were talking about because your image isn't really an image from that city. Oh, all right, well, that makes sense then. Let me swap out that image and maybe that would make more sense. So, try to, get some feedback from your peers, go into the course and see if, post even in the discussion this week. I've had people use the discussion board to put up their work and look for feedback in the past, and it's been very helpful. Use the discussion board that way. Do your actual discussion post, but feel free to start up a thread that says, hey, does anybody else want to post their websites for this week? And I'll give feedback if you don't mind giving me some feedback. Bounce ideas off of your fellow students. You guys are here to help each other, so use the discussion that way. It's a great way to interact with each other and to really do your best design work. So, how to keep your viewer engaged. You want a wow moment in the first 5 seconds. So, in that Feed Music website that we went to, the water was spinning in the background when the page loads, and that text felt like it was hovering right above that spinning water. And it was just such a great, wow moment, such a great visual. Then in the Ice and Sky, which I will open up again, I closed it because it plays a lot of music. Look at how the guys come flying in. And when you move your mouse, they tend to just kind of move around just a little bit with your mouse. And it says the history of climate change. And then each page is just stunning when you go to each page.
It's the adventure that appealed to me at first.
How great is this website? This is just such a great website. But, the headline right there, the history of climate change with the guys flying in, that really was a wow moment with the subtle music in the background. It's it gets all of your senses engaged right away in that website. Such a great example. Here's another way to keep your viewer engaged. Don't copy. Seriously. Duplicating how another product engages users in its opening moments, it can end up being disastrous. I'm not going to show you this example. It's a YouTube video, but you can go in and watch it when I post the slides for you. But basically, if you're a video game person, I am not a video game person, but my husband is, so he told me all about this, and I ended up kind of doing some research on it. The game Skyrim was caught copying the opening sequence from Call of Duty 4, Modern Warfare. So the reason why this was disastrous was that well-known, game enthusiasts were really turned off by the intro, and all it did was accentuate how the Call of Duty intro was actually better. So I have another example of two websites. Sweaty Betty is basically a place that makes knockoff items. And so it's kind of funny that they knocked off the Louis Vuitton website. Well, it's like so blatant. It's like we knock off products in other people's websites. So I found that to be kind of humorous in a way. But you can see it's like, here's the real one and here's the cheap alternative version of it. So don't be the cheap alternative version. All right, some other tips. Incorporate social media in your site. So that means like your Twitter, your Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat's pretty big right now. I don't currently use Snapchat, but I hear it's very big. Try to incorporate those logos into your website so people can see that, not only can they interact with you on your webpage, but that you also have social media. So you want to call that out. Make the navigation easy and intuitive. We don't want to have to think when navigating through a website. It should just make sense. Use video or other types of multimedia on your site. You can have slideshows, animation, because you want to enhance the user experience. If you're stuck or know little about the back end of web design, utilize an existing open source platform such as Joomla or WordPress. And this is if you're actually going in and creating a website. Don't worry about that for this week. We're just doing that Photoshop mockup. But these are just other tips for you to put in, your toolbox when you do get to this point. Also, typography is super important on websites too. It's just as important on a website as it is in your printed piece. Don't make your viewers squint to read the copy on your website. Use clean, neutral colors. The site will look more clean and more professional. You want to think about the fold in your design. The fold is what happens before you scroll. So this is the fold right here, the bottom of the page. You want to think about what happens on your page before a user needs to scroll down. Where does the page end before this fold? These are all things that are very important. And like I said, I posted this article on responsive design above the fold. And it goes into, it kind of comes from a newspaper. When a newspaper was folded, whatever news was above the fold was considered the top news of the day. So what's your top news of the day? And it goes into where the fold is when you are creating a mock-up, and it's at around 768 pixels. So again, here's some good examples. Do people scroll? Yes, but you really want to make them want to scroll. You got 5 seconds again. Pay attention to your design. Limit your font and colors. Have a good logo and utilize professional photographs. So again, all of those tips that I gave you for finding photography last week, make sure you're doing that for your webpage. I don't want to see blown up low-res images. I will be taking points off. So make sure that you're looking for good high-quality images. All right, so here are some examples of that fold that I was talking about. So you have a fold in a regular web page, but then when your web page responds, which means that it shrinks up. Basically, it's a responsive design that works well on your cell phone. What it does is the columns tend to collapse in responsive design, and you can see the difference in the fold on, a mobile screen as opposed to a computer screen. Both of them have a fold. So when you're creating, websites, these are things that you're going to want to think about. So these are some good examples where the fold works both on the desktop version and on the responsive version. Website pixel size. This is one of my biggest things that I like to stick to. And it's such a great, basically, it's just a great rule to follow. Back in 2011, so that's 6 years ago at this point, Smashing Magazine, my favorite online magazine, ran an article on pixel size for body copy on websites, and their number sounded huge. They said you should not have any body copy on your website that is under 16 pixels. But when you stop and think about it, their argument was pretty valid. This is 16 pixels right here. See? 16 pixels. Now you're watching this at home on your screen, and you can see, without me zooming in, that you can read what's on my screen right now. So that's part of that argument about 16 pixels. They made, some really good points that readership, it helps your readership. So that's going to increase your revenue. Nearly 9% of Americans are visually impaired, meaning their vision cannot be completely corrected with lenses. So you don't want them having to, really squint to see your website. As you can see, when I turn my camera on, I wear glasses. I have astigmatism, so I really only have to wear them in situations such as looking at screens and driving late at night, but it's because my eyes don't focus very well. They have a hard time focusing, especially on the HD screens that we have now. So larger type, much easier for me to read. Most people, when sitting comfortably, are about 20 to 23 inches from their computer screen. This is much further than the distance at which we read printed text. Most people do not hold a magazine at arm's length. And a magazine text is probably around 12 to 14 point type, but try holding that at an arm's length and reading. That's the equivalent. So that's why you bump it up to that 16 pixels. So 16 pixel text on a screen is about the same size as text printed in a book or magazine when you take into account the reading distance. So, separate mobile websites versus responsive websites. I'm not quite sure if you are aware that they are actually two separate things. So, they are. Basically, if you have a mobile website, and this is not an app, this is a mobile website, that means that you design a site, a completely separate site than your desktop website, and it has specific content that's only going to show up when your website loads on a mobile phone. And you may have noticed that if you look at the URL, it will have like an M before it, like M dot whatever the URL is, .com. And that signifies that it's a mobile site. So the other way to design it is to have a responsive website in which you only design one site. You use these things called media queries, and as your site collapses, let me see if I can. I'm wondering if this is a responsive site. I have a feeling it probably is. So as the page gets smaller, you'll see like the navigation went away and it became a bar right here. The site starts to close up on itself, and your navigation changes from the desktop version to the regular version. So here's your navigation right here. As the site starts to close, you'll watch it go away right here. Once it hits a certain point, gets smaller, and then goes away. And you have to use the buttons over here. Button here or button here. There we go. So that's a responsive website. If their site wasn't responsive, what would end up happening is there would be like an M, and it would just be a version that's designed this width. basically. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, the difference between mobile versus responsive web design. So as you can see, the responsive is really the way that things are going now. So I guess the question is, why bother with a mobile website, as opposed to a responsive website, or even why bother, worrying about how your website is going to work on a mobile phone at all? Why do we bother? And the reason is, with the U.S. population sitting around 311 million people, that's a lot of people, about half of U.S. adults actually own a smartphone. And I'm surprised it's only half. Although this statistic is from 2012, so there's a good chance that that's gone up. But even in, that's 5 years ago, but, half of U.S. adults own a smartphone. Even if that statistic stayed the same, that's like 175 million people. So that is a lot of eyeballs on your website on a mobile phone. And on top of that statistic, 28% of Americans only use a mobile device to access the web. So they don't even have a desktop anymore. And a mobile device can be an iPad. It can be your cell phone. My husband has like one of those Samsung Notes. I mean, that thing is huge compared to my iPhone. But even like the iPhone's getting bigger. They have like the 6 Plus, the 7 Plus. So the screens are getting larger and people just aren't buying laptops the way they used to. My mother got rid of her laptop years ago and she just uses her iPad for everything. She's considered one of those 28% of Americans who only use a mobile device to access the web now. So what's more is that people are arriving to your mobile, to the mobile web through more diverse channels than ever before. So in addition to direct and referral traffic, companies are using social media, email campaigns, text campaigns, those are your SMS campaigns, search engines, and more. Because these activities are increasingly happening on mobile devices, creating web experiences that are optimized for mobile devices makes even more sense. You want to make sure when a person gets to your website, no matter how they got there, that it works for them. So these are all the ways that somebody might get to your website. You have through text, through QR codes, maybe they Google, maybe they clicked on something in Facebook. Maybe they're one of the 10 people who are still using Google Plus. I don't know. Twitter, email. I mean, there's so many ways that they could have gotten to your website. And even now with Instagram, there is, they built in, URLs, and it doesn't work the same because it doesn't put a hyperlink, but people are sometimes seeing the URL and they're like, oh, hold on, let me type that in. And they'll get to you from Instagram. So, why would anyone visit a website? I mean, why do we go on the web at all? There's pretty much two reasons why somebody visits your website. Not just because they're bored. Although a lot of times I'm sure you've just, sat there on the web or on Facebook or on Twitter and you're like, I've been on here for an hour. Clearly I'm bored. I'm not even doing anything at this point. I mean, we've all probably been there. So there's your information-oriented visitor. This is a person who's looking for basic information. They might also be interested in regularly updated information such as news or locale-specific blog posts. Then you have your action-oriented visitor. So this visitor is looking to interact with the site. Action-oriented visitors might also want to connect with social media channels or shop for merchandise. So if somebody goes to Amazon.com, chances are good that they are an action-oriented visitor. They're there to shop. Somebody who goes on a news website is probably an information-oriented visitor. And somebody who goes on Facebook could be one or the other. So Lane has a hierarchy of mobile needs. So the first one, which is your base, the bottom of the pyramid, is access. First and foremost, users need to be able to access an experience. Then we have the interact link. the next layer of our pyramid. Basic access to a website is essential, but what happens once the visitor is on the website? They need to be able to interact with the content and to get around the website. Then we have the perform link. Performance has gotten the short end of the stick. The result is bulky mobile design that does not load in less than 5 seconds. That's what some of your older mobile websites were doing. Then we have the enhanced link. We don't have to settle on serving a one-size-fits-all experience. Many mobile devices and browsers can do things that desktops cannot. Making the most of these features will take the mobile experience to the next level. So, what's better, a mobile website or a responsive website? Personally, I feel a responsive website is the way to go. I'm not saying that a mobile website does not have its place and doesn't have some positives, but I think in the long run, a responsive website is the way to go, because when you have to do updates to your site, you update it once. If you have to do updates to a site and a mobile site, you have to go in and alter the code in both places. So there's a chance that you might have an error, or you might forget to update something on the mobile website. You might only update the desktop website. So this is why. But to look back at two experiences, I want to go back to the 2012 election, because each candidate actually chose different paths for their mobile website experience. Mitt Romney went with a mobile site, while Obama went with a responsive design. So Obama's mobile website had no full site link, like to get to the full site, because it shared the same code base as their desktop website. It was exactly like that Theme Music one. As soon as you got on the web page, it just changed its layout, and it realized it was on a cell phone, and the layout just collapsed, and you could just keep scrolling rather than have to go to a separate site to access all of the content that you could access on the desktop. However, Mitt Romney's website used device detection to route mobile users to a separate dedicated website, and this created a separate experience that the designers tailored to the mobile web experience. But a separate design in a subdomain also opens the door to some serious problems, which we're going to go over. So let's first look at Romney's website. So this grayed out area was the desktop version of Romney's website. Anything that's highlighted, news, videos, get involved, this bar up here, donate, this link, this link, this link, and this link were featured on the mobile website. But as you can see, only a fraction of the full website's features were included on the mobile website. And only some of the features from the full website have made it into mobile-specific websites. So there's a lot of things that were getting left out if you were accessing his website on your cell phone and you never went onto his website on your desktop. You might have missed out on all this content. So another common problem with separate mobile websites is URL management. And you probably saw this a lot, especially if you're on social media and people share things on social media. So because desktop and mobile content live at separate URLs, device detection is required to route users to the appropriate site. Unfortunately, many websites don't go deep enough in their URL redirection, so desktop users might get sent to mobile content or vice versa, which means that if somebody shared a link on Facebook, they might have accidentally shared that mobile link because they shared it from their cell phone. You clicked on it and you're on your desktop, and all of a sudden you open this up and it's this really skinny block of text, and it's not the full version of the website. And then the same thing might have happened where they might have shared the full website and it wasn't detecting that you were on your cell phone, and you had to like scroll back and forth with your finger to be able to read all of the lines of text, or pinch it really small to make it really small so you could see it, the full page. Either way, it doesn't really work for the experience. Now, on Obama's site, it had a Facebook-esque left flyout navigation for small screens. And among popular responsive techniques, this one is relatively complex, so it did open the door to some problems as well. So these situations, regardless of approach, can be avoided using proper progressive enhancement techniques, but it's a good example of the challenges that arise when you're trying to create an adaptive experience. So as the site started to close, you might end up with a screen that looked like this for a minute if you were on your iPad, and that's clearly not how they wanted it to look. So Obama's website had Facebook ads. Yes. So anyways, I made a video. Sorry, I kept the same text on this page. I made a video to show you one other thing that ended up happening, and it was that if you have everything set up where it's a one-page design, which is great because you don't have, once you're on the page, you don't have to navigate somewhere else. But the problem is you can end up in this like almost infinity scroll. So let me just play this video for you. And we're scrolling, we're scrolling, we're scrolling, 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 scroll. So obviously, you know, that's a problem. You feel like you're scrolling for forever, and then maybe you like reach the bottom and you're like, oh, all right, that was a great article. Wait, where am I on this site? You know, like to get back up to the links to, or something, or back up to the top of the page. You know, that was definitely a problem. Oops. So who wins when you're looking at responsive versus mobile? You know, there's no surefire magic bullet to a mobile experience. But there is one lesson to learn from analyzing these websites and the techniques. It's that this stuff is genuinely hard. A lot of work goes into making a great mobile web experience, and viewing the mobile web as a journey and not a destination is really essential when you're creating those pages. So as we step deeper into the deep end of multi-device web design, we really need to strive to continually improve our websites and services in order to better serve our users wherever they might be and whatever device they might be on. So that's why, you know, we've kind of gone to the responsive design, and what it does is it reloads the page based on whatever your screen size is at. And that's kind of where we're at now, you know, going into like kind of the web of 2017, if you're wondering.